Hi, my name is Dante Gagne, and I'm here to help you succeed with your first Universal Windows apps. If you've been with this video series since the beginning, you've got your app up and running, and from a UI perspective, your app looks good on any device. But of course, looking good is only half the task. In this video, we're going to take a look at the UI debugging tools in Visual Studio. They help you pinpoint problems in your UI so you can take your app from looking good to looking great. After that, we're going to take a brief look at the profiling and diagnostic tools. These tools help you find things like memory leaks or performance issues that nobody wants to see in their apps. Let's jump right in. The first two tools we're going to take a look at are the UI debugging tools and the diagnostics tool window. These tools are designed to let you really see what's happening in your app while it's running, but first I better make sure they're enabled. I'm going to go to Tools Options, scroll down to Debugging, and go to the General tab. Then down at the bottom, the two options I want to make sure are enabled are the Enable UI Debugging Tools for XAML and the Enable Diagnostic Tools while debugging. If those aren't enabled for you, you'll want to turn them on so you can start using these tools. Now I'm going to press OK. I'm going to go ahead and move my app over to the side to take up a little less landscape and run my app. Now I'm running it on the desktop here, but you can use these tools whether you're running on a desktop or in the phone emulator. You can also even use them when you're working with a remote machine. In this case, though, I'm running it all on the same device, which makes it a little bit easier for demonstration purposes. There's my running app. And let me go ahead and move that to the other side of the screen. And let's bring up the Live Visual Tree and Live Property Explorer. Now the Live Visual Tree gives me a view of the entire visual tree of my application as it's running. It doesn't matter if the elements are coming from a control template or a user control or anything like that. The Live Visual Tree is going to go ahead and show me the absolute visual tree that's being used in my application. Now you can select elements directly in the Live Visual Tree, but I always find it easier to turn on the in-app selection, find the guy I want to use with a single click. Now, as soon as I do that, when the in-app selection is on, my application isn't going to process any click events because it's sending those to the Live Visual Tree. So as soon as I want to start working with it again, I got to remember to turn that off. Now, let me go ahead and move back to this button here. And let's take a look at the Live Property Explorer, which is the right half. This is showing me all the properties that are set on this given control. Like, for instance, the border brush, the style, these are being set locally. You can also see where other properties are coming from, like for instance, the background is coming from the default style supplied by the platform. And I also have my own style, which is coming from some location in categories.xaml. You can see very quickly where all your properties are being set, what properties are overriding properties from other styles, and so on. And this gives you a real nice way to figure out what properties are being set where and figure out where the problems are in your application. Now I'm going to go to the text box here. And I can actually push property changes from the Live Property Explorer to the running app. So you'll see that as soon as I change that, it goes ahead, updates it locally, and updates the running app for me. But there were a few other changes, like for instance, it created an inlines property, which is what happened behind the scenes. All that's happening here is it gives me a real easy opportunity to make changes in my application, whether they're at the local scope, within a style, or what have you, and see what changes those are going to make on the application as a whole. The Live Visual Tree and the Live Property Explorer really help you work with your UI, drill down and find those quirky issues that act odd. Now let me go ahead and move those guys out of the way. And the next tool I want to look at is the Diagnostic Tools window, which is the one that's here in the middle of my screen. What this is doing is it's giving me a live representation of the events that are going on in my application, how much memory I'm using, what my CPU utilization is, and it's doing all of that in real time. You know, I just mentioned before that you need to turn the in-app selection off in the Live Visual Tree because as I'm about to go ahead and interact with my app again, if the Live Visual Tree was intercepting my events, that's not going to work very well. Now, watch what happens when I go ahead and I click over here in the app. You'll see that my CPU, it's a little bit difficult to see, but there wasn't a huge change in my CPU, but there was a garbage collection that happened. Let me drill a little bit deeper. Well, hang on, something interesting happened here. Let me pause my application, which will pause the data collection, and a red diamond just showed up for me. Now, if I mouse over that, it tells me that there was a file not found exception. What happened here, well, let me go ahead and click it. I can see the information down at the bottom, and when I double click that, get that out of the way, my source code jumps to the location where that particular exception occurred. Now in this case, I am handling the file not found exception correctly, but sometimes those exceptions, when they happen, even if you think you're handling them, can lead to certain errors. The diagnostic tool window helped me find where an exception was happening so I could go ahead and backtrace to make sure that I'm handling it exactly the way we want. This tool can really help you find out as you're interacting with your app. You can immediately see where your CPU spikes are, where your memory spikes are. It brings a lot of that information together to let you drill down into what you need. Now I'm going to go ahead and close this. I don't know if you were paying attention, but when I first launched this application, it was a little bit slow. I seem to have some startup problems with this. I want to go ahead and use the next of the tools that we're going to deal with, which is the timeline tool. I'm going to stop debugging. And I'm going to go ahead and maximize because I'm having a hard time working in this little half window. And I'm going to go ahead and launch my application this time with profiling. So I'm going to go to debug, and I'm going to start the diagnostic tools without debugging. So this is how you start a profile. Now it asks me which tools do I want to use, and in this case I want to work with the application timeline and the CPU usage. Now you'll notice it's warning me that I'm in debug mode, and whenever you're compiling with debug, you've got symbols and things like that compiled in. If I really were trying to profile, I'd probably use my release edition, but in this case, I'm going to go ahead and use a debug, so it really works either way just fine. I'm going to go ahead and press start. This time it's going to load my application, and my application has started. Now, in the background, it's going ahead and doing all the processing for me, but I'm going to stop the collection because the problem I was dealing with was in startup. I'm past the startup, so the issues are going to be gone. All right, so let's take a look at what we have here. Yeah, application startup is taking 5.6 seconds. That's actually quite a hefty chunk of time. So I'm going to click that, I'm going to right click, and I'm going to filter to that time range. So what I'm doing now is I'm telling the timeline tool that the only thing I'm interested in is anything that happened during this particular span. Let me go over to my CPU usage tab, and I can see that my cookbook.app on launched took 75% of my CPU time and 3,700 of the 5,000 milliseconds. Well, if I've got a performance issue, odds are that's probably where it is. So, okay, it's in onLaunched. So let me go to my Solution Explorer. Let me look for onLaunched. Okay, it tells me here it is, and I can go ahead and double click, and it jumps right to that method for me. All right, my problem seems to be here in the onLaunched method. Now, what I'm going to do is I want to try to figure out where my issue is. I realize I've got a region down there that says long-running computation, which, let's be honest, that's probably where the issue is, but let's go through the process of figuring out where the particular issue is anyway, so you can see how I could use these tools. Now, since the problem seems to be in this method, I'll go ahead and create a breakpoint up here, run my app, and it's going to break for me once we get into application startup. Okay, I'm in my onLaunched event. Now let's see if we can figure out where that problem is. I'm going to take a step forward. And if you notice, it's kind of small, but I'm going to zoom in here. You see that little less than or equal to 3 milliseconds elapsed? What Visual Studio is doing is telling me that the amount of time it took to go from that previous statement to this statement was around 3 milliseconds. So if I'm looking for a performance issue, it's probably not that particular line. Now, it says less than or equal because, well, let's be honest, like I said, we're running with a debug build here, so I've got my symbols and I can go ahead and do everything I need to. That's going to create some small overhead, but less than or equal to 3 milliseconds, it's a good estimate, and I don't need exact times here. I need to find relative times. So every time I step over, Visual Studio is going to go ahead and let me know just roughly how much time that particular statement took. Now, I don't think my problem is anywhere in this loop, but let's validate that. I'm going to put another breakpoint, hit continue. It runs all the code up to that breakpoint and then reports 4 milliseconds elapsed. That's how long it took from where the current execution step was all the way to this point. So I can take an entire chunk of code and evaluate how long that took. Again, these are all just tools to help you narrow down where your performance issue happens to be. Let me step forward again. Okay, here's my compute method. Let me take one more step forward, and yeah, I knew this is where it's going to be, but watch what happens. Now when it resumes after it steps that one, it's telling me right there, This step took 3.6 seconds. There's your performance issue. So using the timeline tool, it helped me find exactly which method my particular performance issue is coming from. And then by using the perf tips, I'm able to step through step by step until I figure out which method is causing the performance. Now I can drill deeper into that one until I figure out, well, I might find out that perhaps I'm pulling down images from the net or something like that. I can use an asynchronous call to get that off the UI thread and speed up my application startup. Tricks like this can really help you make your application start up quick, your overall feel quick, and really satisfy your customers that much more. The UI debugging tools help you tweak your UI to perfection. The diagnostic tool window helps you gain insight into exactly how your app is using system resources, and the timeline and perf tips help you find performance issues and get them fixed. Combined, putting that extra bit of polish on your app is easier than ever. The difference between a functional app and an app that looks and feels polished can make a non-trivial impact on how your users feel about your app, how much they use it, and how much they share it with their friends. The tools we've explored in this video series should give you exactly what you need to thrill your customers, get them excited, and get them talking about your app. I've included a few links here to more information about the UI debugging tools, as well as the profiler and diagnostics windows. I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to share my excitement around the Universal Windows platform, and from here, it's all up to you.